we my Tamayna Rabbanan. First word of the line is we are on Beis Amid Beis in the art scroll. It's Beis Amid Beis B2B3. 2B3 and the last paragraph. My Taimayu the Rabbanan. What's the reason for the Rabbanan? That we have the machlokas between the Rabbanan. Good morning. And Rishmol ben Broker. Rabbanan say you do the value of the one who got damaged, the victim, right? The animal killed the person. The fourth time the animal killed, we say that you got to go ahead and we said you have to kill the animal, of course, after the first time, but we said that the animal has to ask the payment of kofar. And the Tanakama, which is the Rabbanan, said that payment is the value of the victim. That's the nizik. That's the nizik is the one that was damaged. And the Gemara first wanted to say that the Rabbanan is of the opinion that kofar is mamon, is a compensation. And therefore, how do you compensate? By value of the loss. That's the value of the one who got damaged. That was the first approach of the Gemara. Then the Gemara said no. Rav Papa said maybe everybody agrees kofar is an atonement, but the Rabbanan hold the atonement is achieved by giving the value of the victim, not your own value. The other opinion says no. How is atonement achieved? By giving your value, the value of the owner of the animal who did the damage. So the Gemara wants to understand what is pushing, what is compelling each of the opinions that this rabbi says goes this way, this rabbi goes that way. It doesn't, you could say either way is the way. How do you redeem? Plus, says redeem yourself. You can redeem yourself by paying for by paying your value. You can redeem yourself by paying. You want to help me out over here, Aaron, with the computer here? You can redeem yourself by paying the value of the victim, right? So what is the Gemara wants to understand? What is the reason for the machlokas? Want to get me back to the regular screen? Okay, and some people want to join. How do we see if people who want to join? It doesn't show now who wants to join, right? Okay. Okay, so maybe they'll try again. Okay. We'll go back to here. Okay, very good. Okay, good morning, Nathan. Okay, so the Gemara says, what's the reason for the machloket? Meaning each person has an opinion for what's driving your opinion. That's what the Gemara wants to understand. So the Gemara says, Nema hashota l'mayla. The pasuk says, Nema hashota l'mata, Nema hashota l'mayla. The pasuk says,
Come in.
Very good.
Just not admit.
Very good. They're joined. They're joined already. Okay. Very good. So the Gemara, the pasuk says by kofar, im kofar yushat alav. The pasuk says if you pay kofar, which means if it's the fourth offense, it says the word yushat. And also we have another time the pasuk says, also not too far away, it says the idea by another pasuk, by a different scenario, when an animal damaged a woman who was pregnant, and it uses the language of kasher yashit alav haba'alav, as according to the husband of the wife who lost the fetus, he brings them to court. He brings the owner of the animal to court for doing such not watching his animal. As a result of that, the animal gored a pregnant woman, and there was loss of the fetus. So in both cases, it uses a similar word. So the Gemara said, and just like what do you say, hashata, yeah, and So the Gemara says, just like in that other case, it's referring to the victim, the husband of the woman who got damaged. So too here, when the Torah says, Kofer, you shot the love, it's also referring to the victim, the value of the victim. That's what the Gemara, that's the opinion of the Rabbanan. So it says, so Rashi fits in the blank. Rashi says, look at the Rashi. Nema hashata lamayla b'nogiv isha. The fourth line in Rashi. Someone who nogiv isha harav. Someone, the animal gored a pregnant woman. Kashe yashit alav balisha. It's called lamayla. Why is it called? It says lamayla, above. That means the earlier pasuk is called above. A later pasuk is called downstairs, down. What's up and what's down, right? If I want to refer to a pasuk that came early in the Torah, that's called above, right? Because earlier is above, wherever we are on the page now, what was written early in the Torah, it's called Lamaila. If it says Lamata, something that says underneath, that means it's later. Underneath is later, and above is earlier. That's clear? So so Rashi says, it says Hashata Lamaila early in the Torah, it says by the animal damaging the pregnant woman. And now later it says Nema Hashata Lamata, it says by Kofer, the same similar word. So the Gemara says Ma lahalan b'nizuk, just like over there, it's referring to the nizuk. You see the way the Bach changes the text of the Gemara, because following Rashi, that he has the text of the Gemara, it says Hashota Lamaila, V'nema Hashota Lamata. That's how you read it. It says Hashota earlier and Hashota now. Malhala b'nizik aftan b'nizik. So here also, it's referring to the victim, the value of the victim. That is what's driving the Rabbanan's opinion that the kofer is estimated by using the victim, based on the language of the Torah. Rabbi Shmuel says, it's true you might have those psukim that have a similar word, but the pasuk, the context of this pasuk seems, he says the language of the pasuk by kofer is lending more to the idea of giving the value of the owner of the animal. Okay, we're going to get Nathan into the, why is it the value of the animal? Because it's pidyon nafsho. It says you got to give the pidyon of your nefesh. The pidyon of your nefesh, with the simple understanding of giving the pidyon of your nefesh, is who has to redeem his soul. The one whose animal killed has to redeem his soul. So if he has to redeem his soul, so he would understand you redeem your soul by paying your value. So therefore, he sees from that pasuk that you have to give the value of the owner of the animal in order for you to have proper. The case is someone's animal killed a person for the fourth time. The owner did not watch the animal properly, and it's the fourth person that fourth guy the animal killed. And upon animal kills a person. The fourth time that the animal has killed a person, and the first time the animal kills a person, there's no money, there's no payment of money. The animal gets stoned. And God will deal with the owner of the animal for not being careful. The fourth time, it seems now there's mita b'dei shamayim. Now God will the guy is actually deserving of death, not by the court down here. In heaven, he's the servant of death, owner of the animal. But if he gives money, then he'll get out of the death. If he redeems himself by giving a payment, that will get him out of death. The fourth time. That's kofer. That's what the kofer is going to get him out of that problem. Yes. Oh, see, right. That's the opinion of the Rabbanan. Morning, everybody. Morning, Jaime. Morning, Yosef. Morning, Akiva. So that's the morning, Morris.
Everyone.
Morning. So that's the reason of Rabbi Yishmael. We're now in the Gemara of Rabbanan. The last word of the line is Rabbanan, and the article, what we say, it's article B2, what do we say, 3? B2, 3 on the bottom, last words of the, now we're on 2B4, top of 2B4, yes. Right. Pregnant woman who lost the fetus, that's referring to the victim. The pregnant woman was the victim in that case. Right. Different pasuk, different story, different pasuk. Rabbanan, in. Rabbanan say yes. Pidyon nafsho ksif. It's true. The owner of the animal has to redeem himself. But mihu kishaminon, how does he redeem himself for not watching his animal? To the nizik shamina. The way we do it is by evaluating the victim who got killed. That's how there'll be a proper pidyon nafsho. There'll be a proper redemption of the owner of the animal's soul, that he'll be spared from mita v'dei shemayim. How does he redeem himself? He redeems himself by using the value of the victim who got killed. Okay. The Gemara says, now the Gemara goes to the next case. We said, but the Rabbanan explained that their reason, they say that the way you go ahead and you evaluate the kofer is using the value of the victim. Yes. Yeah, which from Rabbanan in. Yes. Pidyon nafsho ktiv. The Torah says you got to redeem yourself. You got to redeem yourself. If you went ahead, if you didn't watch your animal, and your animal went in and killed somebody for the fourth time, you have to redeem your soul. The guy's in bad shape because he didn't watch his animal for the fourth time. But mihu, even though you're giving redemption for yourself, kishaminan, when we evaluate that redemption of your soul, how do you evaluate that redemption? How do you accomplish redeeming yourself? B'denizuk shamina. See the language, doctor? By using the value of the victim. That's how you evaluate. Is that clear, the language or not? Nizik is the victim. The question in the Gemara was, when we give this this payment of kofer for his animal killing a person for the fourth time, how do you evaluate the value of what he has to give? Does he give this kofer? Does he give the kofer by? But does he give kofer by? No, I don't need it. I mean, I only need to tell the people where they're up to. No. Do you go ahead and evaluate the victim who got killed? How much he was worth on the market to be sold? If he would be sold in the market, or do you evaluate the value of the owner of the animal? So that's the machloket Rabbanan and Yishmael ben Broka. But the nizuk is the victim who got killed. Right. They disagree in what you actually pay. Do you pay the value of the victim, or do you usually pay his own value? That's the machloket.
So they say yes, the kabbalah is for nefesh, but it's not based on.
But how do you get it's not based on the value of the owner. It's based on the victim. That's the understanding. It is for the owner to redeem, but how do you redeem yourself? That's the question. You see both. It could be the value of the owner of the animal. It's like his money's instead of him. Like we said, like trying to go on Kaparot Erev Yom Kippur, that the chicken is instead of the person. Okay, but the issue here is more of his kapara. I mean, it's serving a kapara. It's not serving monetary compensation. That's what these opinions are saying now. It's not fulfilling the loss, the financial loss, or the law of the payment that's deserving. It's coming for kapara. So now the question is how do you get the kapara? What is the way to get the kapara? That's the dispute in the Gemara.
What exactly happened?
Right, what happened with the pregnant woman is, what happened with the pregnant woman was someone had an animal and he didn't watch his animal, and the animal went ahead and there was a woman, and there were two people fighting. And one guy, by mistake, went ahead and, maybe the woman was trying to get involved a little bit to help her stop the fight, that husband shouldn't be fighting it. And one of the guys went, again, there's two cases in the Torah. You have to see one of the cases that the woman got hit. The woman got hit by, let's just look at the pasuk, the Chumash, to see if maybe it's a man hit the woman. And the man hit the woman. I think that's the case if we look again in the pasuk. And now what we do is we go to court. The husband of the woman who lost the fetus, he goes to court, and there's an evaluation of loss of a certain payment that needs to be given to the husband for the loss that the wife lost lost the fetus as a result of this damage by the other person. It's nothing to do with kofar, but it's that the Gemara brought that case because the wording, it's the word that's used there. There's a word yashit that's used over there, and that word that's over there is a similar word that's used by kofar. The Gemara only brought the case of the woman that got hit to illustrate how do you translate a word. If this word refers to the victim, or this word refers to the one who did the damage. The total different case, correct. Now, the Gemara continues. We said that the witnesses, if the witnesses framed somebody and they wanted to obligate him money to pay, and the way some of the Rishonim explained, they came into court. The guy had was not doing well financially. He had no money financially, and as a result of their framing, the guy would be sold as an Eved Ivri, right? But if you realize, if you go ahead, because what happened, they came to court and they say Reuven stole $10,000 from Shimon. Now, what's the law if you say somebody stole money? And if someone stole money, if we have witnesses that say he stole money, so the law is you have to pay back the money. But what happens if you don't have the money to pay back? The court will actually sell the person as a slave. That's what the court will do, because you have to pay back. You have to pay back, and this is the way we're going to raise money. We'll sell him as a slave, and there'll be money be given that has value. So what happens if that happened? Two guys come to court. Two guys come to court. They say Reuven stole $10,000 from Shimon on a certain date. Shimon, there was a burglary by Shimon. We don't know who stole the money. And two witnesses come to court say, we got the guy. This guy stole $10,000. And then subsequently, two of the witnesses come and say, how could you guys testify that Reuven is the one who stole the $10,000 from Shimon in New York on such and such a date? You guys were with us that date, that time, in a totally different part of the world. Impossible that he could have stolen. So, and the court checks out the testimony of the second witnesses. They're honest people, and so on and so forth. And we believe, the Torah says you believe the second pair of witnesses. So what would you think? Due to the first pair of witnesses, what they wanted to do to Reuven. They wanted Reuven, what did you say? They wanted, and again, the court obligated. Now we're going to see exactly what did the court obligate. There was a verdict of the court based on the testimony of the witnesses. And so we would say, let's sell the first pair of witnesses, because that's what they wanted to do to Reuven. They wanted Reuven to be sold. So we say we don't do that. The witnesses who frame somebody on a thievery, they do not get sold. They don't get sold. It's another exception to the rule. We don't do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to Reuven. They wanted Reuven bad things. They wanted Reuven to have to be sold. They came in with the intention, we wanted to be sold as a slave. That's why they were coming to court. They knew at that time he had no money at the time. They're coming to court. They want to sell. They want to really get him good. And how do they want to get him good? By making him sold as a slave. Nevertheless, we're not going to do to the witnesses what they wanted to do. So the Gemara wants to understand why not? What's the case? Why shouldn't we do to the witnesses what they wanted to do? There's a law, law, the basic law of Zomimim is you do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other guy. They came to court with the intention to make the other guy be sold as a slave. So why don't we do it to them? That's what the Gemara is going to discuss. Okay. Now it seems that you could explain. The Gemara is going to bring a Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna is going to try to limit this chidush. He's trying to limit the case that we're going to not sell the witnesses. He's going to say it's only on a specific type of case, but he's going to say other type of cases we would sell the witnesses as slaves. So we're going to see how he's going to understand the Gemara. Then we're going to conclude with another rabbi at the end of the Gemara that under all circumstances we're not going to sell the guy as a slave. But that's how the Gemara is going to come to flow. Yes.
So if they pray that we're stealing, the punishment is
Being sold as a slave.
We assume that was what maybe they wanted to inconvenience them. Or maybe
Oh, very good. Whether they understood what will happen as a result of the testimony, at the end of the day, we got to do to them what the Torah just says you do to them what they wanted to do to the other guy. So you're saying they didn't want to do that? Based on their testimony, that was going to happen. Whether they...
So like they knew that the guy.
So that's how some... Right, that's one opinion in the Gemara, according to one rabbi. We'll see how that's going to develop. What'd you say? Nimkarim is from the language of a mocher, be sold. Nimkarim is like mecher. Mecher is a sale. So ein nimkarim, we do not sell them as a. There's an expression mekach umemkar, buying and selling. So the word nimkarim is from the language of sale. So the Gemara says ein nimkarim levid ivri. They're not sold as slaves. These witnesses who framed this guy on a thievery, they're not sold as slaves. So Sovar Ramamnuna Lemema. By the way, there used to be a time on the clock here. So if it gets to 7:25, you can just notify me. So no, it's all right. Sorry, I'll put my phone down. Okay. No, because we put it on a different screen. Okay. So the Gemara, now it's 7:07. Sovar Ramamnuna back in the Gemara. Sovar Ramamnuna Lemema. Rav Hamnuna thought to say the following. He's trying to understand what he understood. The Gemara was saying the following. Hani mile heicha de isle lidide. When the case that we're not going to sell the witnesses is when at the end of the day, by the time the court made the verdict, it's true the witnesses came in, the guy they framed at that time had no money, and based on that, they were coming in to really, with the motives to really get him to be sold as a slave. But by the time the court made the verdict, he already had a windfall, as they said. Things came in, his stocks went up, whatever it was, and he was doing. This guy had now the ability to pay. The guy they framed, Ruve, who they framed, would have the ability to pay for the thievery that he stole, and therefore, Rav Hamnuna says that since at the end of the day, he had the money. So he would have been sold only at the moment that they walked into court. But by the time the verdict came in, the verdict was not that you have to pay the money or be sold, but the fact that he has the money, he will not be sold. Meaning that the time the court made the verdict, at that moment, he's not being sold better, and therefore he's not going to be sold. Since he's not going to be sold as a slave, because he has financial abilities at the end by the time the court made the verdict, based on the testimony of the first pair of false witnesses. So therefore, the witnesses themselves, the framers, were not going to have to be sold as well. Why? Because at the end of the day, by the time the verdict came in, the person they framed was not going to be sold as a slave. So even though when you walked into court, you started testifying about a guy and you were trying to frame a guy and cause him to be sold as a slave, but he had no money, But at the end of the day, by the time the court made its verdict that he has to be made the verdict that guilty, the guy, the one you framed, had the ability to pay, and therefore was not going to be sold. Therefore, we're not going to sell the witnesses. However, what about if at the time of the verdict, the guy has no money? Not only when you came into court, the false witnesses, but the time the verdict was meted down, they said, you have to pay this or be sold, and he has no money, and he's going to be sold. Then the witnesses are going to have to be sold. That's what Hamnuna says. Hamnuna says we're not giving the witness. We're going to fulfill do to them what they wanted to do under that circumstance. And the circumstance when the Breita says you're not going to sell them is very limited. The exception is very limited. It's only when they attempted, when they came into court, the guy had no money. But if at the end of the day, the guy had money at the end of the day, and therefore at the end of the day, the one they framed was not going to be sold. So therefore you're not going to sell them. But if at the end of the day, the guy has no money at the time of the verdict of the court, and therefore based on the testimony of the framers, he would have been sold. We got to sell these witnesses also. No, we don't give them the payment. We got to give them this is we're going to give them. They're going to have to be sold as a. That's the next point of the Gemara. But at this point, you say, listen, doesn't make a difference whether the Zomim, the framers, have money or not. At the end of the day, you wanted this guy to be sold as a slave, and this was according to Rav Hamnuna, you were accomplishing that. You were meaning based on the verdict of the court. The court was going to sell this guy that you framed. So I don't care if you have money. You have to be sold because you got to do to them what they wanted to do to. That's Rav Hamnuna at this point. We're going to see the Gemara is going to challenge. What?
And then later it would be why. Why do you want to make it less severe?
Because at the end of the day, based on their testimony, the court did not obligate selling of a slave, that they have to be sold as slaves. Meaning at the end of the day, even though they came into court, the guy had no money, they framed. They want to be sold as a slave. But what happened? By the time the court made a verdict, based on their testimony, the victim that they were framing already had ability to pay for that $10,000. And therefore he was not going to be, the court rendered a decision, not that he's going to have to be sold. The court made a decision, you have to pay $10,000 and he's not going to be sold because he had the money at the end of the day. So therefore we should not sell the slaves because their testimony did not accomplish a verdict of sale. Yes, Dan. Rav Hamnuna, correct. Exactly. That would be a case. Exactly. Morning, Mr. Feldman. He wanted to cause them at the time of the. It was more than that. According to this opinion in the Rishonim, he wanted to. It's true he wanted to cause them $10,000, but they really wanted to cause them to be sold, and because at the time they walked into court, they say the testimony, the guy doesn't have $10,000. So therefore, they want him to be sold.
Now they're going to be sold for 7 years.
They're going to be sold for the value of that $10,000, whatever the normal value is. Right. 6 years. You work for 6 years, you go free at 7 years. So we have, whatever the laws that we have of when Bezin sells somebody, we have to see what the laws are regarding, when he would go free. But let's say it's a 5 year, it would be 5 years to pay back the money, whatever the case would be. Okay, but that would be a good question. You have to look into halachos by when the court sells a person, the laws on that. Okay, so the Gemara says the following. So that's the Gemara says again. Sava Rav Hamnuna l'meima. Rav Hamnuna thought to say the following. Hani mile. When is this talking about? Heicha de Israel didei. When do the witnesses? We're talking about witnesses framing somebody on a thievery. And the Gemara says, if you frame someone on a thievery, we're not going to, if you frame someone on a thievery, the person, if he doesn't have money to pay for the thievery, he has to be sold as a slave. And you framed him. You said he stole the money. even though you framed him, we're not going to do to you what you wanted to do to the guy. You wanted him to be sold as a slave. We're not going to sell you as a slave. And the Gemara wants to know why not. And the Gemara now explains. Rav Nuna thought, when is the case that you're not going to sell the witnesses who framed him? When at the end of the day, the one they framed had the ability to pay at the end. The migui, the iulom is davin, since he will not have been sold at the end of the day because he had money by the time the verdict came. The victim that they framed had the ability to pay. So inunamilom is davni. We're not going to sell the witnesses who framed him because at the end of the day, the victim would not have been sold because at the end of the day, the victim had the ability to pay. But if he doesn't have, if the victim that they framed doesn't have the money by the time the witnesses came to court, the false witnesses until the verdict, the guy does not have the ability to pay the $10,000. And therefore, as a result of the verdict, the guy is going to be sold as a slave. So even if the witnesses who framed him have money, even though they have, the first word aligns the Isla, even though they have, we're going to sell the slaves. That's Daniel, that's your case. They have money, the witnesses who framed him, but the guy they framed, the verdict was paid at 10,000. He doesn't have 10,000. The verdict is he needs to be sold as a slave. So you, based on your testimony, there was a verdict that this guy is going to be sold as a slave. So therefore, the witnesses need to be sold as a slave. That's what. That's what. That's what I'm. Right. So this is his understanding of the exception of when don't you sell the false witnesses as a slave is only if by the time the verdict was handed out, the one they framed had the ability to pay for the thievery. That's Rav Hamnuna's limitation of the chiddush of regarding this case. Now the Gemara shoots back. V'leim rulei. The Gemara says, how could that be? How could that be? Leim rulei ant havilach mi havim misdavnis. If you would have had, why can't the witnesses say to the victim that they framed? We framed you. What did we come to court to do? We came to court to say like this: if you have money to pay, you'll pay the money for the thievery. If you don't have money to pay, you will be what? Sold as a slave. So do to us, the witnesses, what we wanted to do to you. But we have money to pay, so therefore we should have to just pay the money. So if the witnesses have the ability to pay, so what should you do? What did they want to do to the guy? They want to do to the guy, if he doesn't have the ability to pay, he should pay. If he has the ability to pay, if he has the ability to pay, he pays. So we who have the ability to pay, so we should be able to get off the hook by just paying. We didn't only come to say that you have to be sold as a slave. Our testimony said if you have the ability to pay, you would pay and not be sold as a slave. What? Right. So we don't. But in general, when a guy comes into court, I'm saying sometimes you can know the guy he lost all his fortune. You can know that. But anytime a guy comes into court to say that someone stole something, he knows there's two possible consequences. Either the victim has to pay for it, or the guy's gonna have to be sold as a slave. So if that's the case, so why don't we say, good morning, Mr. Batesh. The Gemara says, so why don't we say the same thing by say the witnesses can say we have the ability to pay for it. So that's what you should do to us. Do to us that we should pay for the thievery. So the Gemara says the following. And right, the witnesses have the money. Right. So even though Ruvain doesn't have the money, we're talking about a case of Adam Zon Mim, someone framing, witnesses framing somebody. The general rule is when you frame someone, you do to them what you wanted to do to others. And whatever that thing you wanted to create a punishment the other guy will happen to you. But the Gemara says there's an exception. One of the exceptions, if you frame someone on a thievery, that even though, and usually the thievery could come with it being sold as a slave, if a person does not have the money to pay what he stole, he's sold as a slave, But the framers who frame somebody on this will not be sold as slaves. They will be. What will happen to them? They will get lashes for this. So the Gemara now wants to say the following. So now the Gemara says, this is what Rav Hamnuna would say the following. This is what Rav Hamnuna would tell you. Hani mile heched isle oladiday oladitu. 1 second. Yes. Hani mile heched isle oladiday oladitu. If the witnesses, if the guy they framed has the ability to pay, or the witnesses have the ability to pay, at that time, we're not going to sell the witnesses. Because at the end of the day, the witnesses came to court. They said this guy stole this $10,000. If the guy has even though when they came to court, the guy did not have the ability to pay. And based on that, he would have been sold as a slave. At the end of the day, if the guy has money by the time the verdict was handed down, so therefore, they're not gonna have to be sold as slaves. Or even if the guy did not have money, by the time the verdict was handed down, the guy they framed did not have money to pay back the thievery, but the witnesses had the ability to pay back, so the witnesses also won't be sold. However, but what about if the witnesses, they come into court, they framed the guy they framed does not have the ability to pay the $10,000. They said, Reuven, you stole $10,000 from Shimon. And Reuven doesn't have the ability to pay the $10,000 from Shimon. And therefore, Reuven would be sold as a slave. And the witnesses also don't have the ability to pay the money. So what would you say? And you would say, do to the witnesses what they want to do to the other guy. What they want to do to the other guy, they want the other guy either to pay the money or to be sold as a slave, right? You come into court and you say, Reuven stole from Shimon. You know you come into court one or two things. Either be sold as a slave or pay the money, right? If you have the money, you pay it. You don't have the money, you're sold as a slave. So shouldn't we do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other guy? If we should let the witnesses be sold under such a circumstance, if they don't have the money to pay, and the guy who they framed didn't have the money to pay, they should go ahead and be sold, because that's what they wanted to do to the other guy. That's what Rav Hamnuna says. Rav Hamnuna says they're not going to get off the hook. These witnesses are not going to get off the hook from being sold as slaves, because at the end of the day, this is what you wanted to do to the other guy. You wanted to create him to be sold as a slave or pay the money. So you don't have the money to pay. You have to be sold as a slave. Exactly what you wanted to do to them. That's what Rav Hamnuna wants to say. Is that clear? Is that clear, everybody? So what does the Gemara say? If the guy who they framed doesn't have the ability to pay for the thievery, and the witnesses who framed him don't have the ability to pay for the thievery, then Mizdavni, maybe we should sell the witnesses under such a circumstance. God bless you. Amalei Rava. Rava says no, we do not do that. Why not? God bless you. The Torah says when somebody steals, the Torah's punishment for thievery is you pay it back. And the Torah says if you don't have the money to pay it back, you're going to sell you as a slave. You're going to work it. We're going to work hard to pay it back. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Aney. But right, the pasuk is very specific, and as we said, the Torah does not want people to be sold as slaves. The Torah is against selling another Jew as a slave, and the Torah goes out of its way, and it says a word that seems to be not necessary. No such thing as a not necessary word in the Torah. The context of the pasuk is talking about the thievery, and what does the pasuk say? V'nimka b'gneivato. You're sold as a result of your thievery. So the Gemara says that extra word b'gneivato, because it could have just said and you sold. The context was that you sold because of you stole. Why does it reiterate the word you sold because of your stealing? Because the Torah wants to teach you the following: the only time you're going to be sold as a slave is the only time that the court will sell you as a slave is only if you did the act of thievery. But if you did not do an act of thievery, what did you do? You framed somebody. And based on your framing, you were going to cause someone to be sold as a slave. We're not going to do to you guys, the witnesses, what you wanted to do to the other guy. We're not going to make you be sold. Why? The Torah doesn't want you to be sold as a slave in such a circumstance. We want you to get lashes. He's going to get lashes. And it could be, the reason is because being that Hashem in general doesn't want people to be sold as slaves, so only under certain circumstances they're going to be sold as a slave. But that we, the court, should sell you as a slave because you framed someone, we rather give you a different punishment, which is the punishment of lashes.
But Rabbi,
yes,
it's treating Ed Sheker lighter than a thief, when the crime of Ed Sheker has to be much worse than stealing.
oh, it's very okay. It's a good morning. Yes, you're saying why are we treating the 8 shekel less than Ivri? Because I mean, really, the idea of doing something to somebody what he wanted to do to the other guy is it's not is a big chidush that we give the guy such a punishment. So it could be that we rather not give the guy if we could avoid selling somebody as a slave. That we feel that maybe there's some, have a great day, everybody. We prefer not, even though you're asking that a thief, that you're saying it's worse, we should go ahead and give a stronger punishment for the witnesses than the thief. So you're saying, why are we being lighter on the witnesses?
Putting an innocent person at risk of being sold as a slave by an Ed Sheker is being treated lighter than if you do it yourself. I think it should be the opposite.
You say maybe the witnesses should be sold. That's what you're saying?
I think so, because if you weigh the crime of putting someone else to be sold as a slave in your stead by framing them, or stealing yourself and being sold as a slave, you would say the person who frames is a much more serious crime.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you could say there's a logic to say that you framed the guy, but it didn't happen. You didn't act. The guy who stole actually stole the money. The witnesses, that's true. They were attempting to create a loss of money, but they were not successful. They attempted.
Yeah, but Rabbi, the point is
right,
trying to make, it's really kind of, if you don't punish them severe, you open the gap for more false witnesses to come. But if you punish them severe, you kind of send a message that, if you're doing something wrong, you get punishing really strong,
Right.
And that's the message we have to send, because you don't want people to come and give false witnesses, You don't have an easy ticket. I'm going to smack you and that's it. You don't get to get punished.
Right. Okay. Right. I'm just trying to answer the question by just pointing out this phenomenon that the witnesses were not successful in what they wanted to do. So maybe that could end. And it seems that the Torah is very hesitant to go ahead. What's it? Yeah. The Gemara. Yeah. Put away. The Torah is it seems that the Torah is hesitant to sell somebody as a slave. So maybe Jaimi's right, and Yosef, you're right, that maybe you would think there should be a stronger punishment, but maybe the being sold as a slave is so detrimental to the spiritual growth of the person. Maybe that's why the Torah is preferring not to sell him as a slave, because of the great detriment to one's spiritual growth of being a slave. A slave is looked at, you're taking someone else as your boss, and you're not going to be focused on God as your boss. So maybe, therefore, maybe that's why there's a preference that he should not be sold as a slave. Maybe because of that reason. It's a very good question. I'm just trying to share some possible ideas to explain why the reason for the Torah doesn't give a reason, but maybe that's the reason, because of the detrimental to spiritual growth of being a slave.
Okay, Rabbi, come pray.
Yeah, thank you very much. You got it. Thank you. I'm coming upstairs. You got it.
Thank you.
Have a great day. See you soon. Yosef at Tzaddik, take care. Have a great day. Have a great day, Yosef.
Thank you, and Chodesh Tov, Rabbi.
Rosh Chodesh is tonight. You're right. Tomorrow and Friday. Tonight, you got it.
Yes.
Double Rosh Chodesh. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.